Van Helsing 2016. The snow falls like ash over a dead world. It is not beautiful. It is not peaceful. It is the kind of snow that buries everything: homes, roads, memories, and reminds the few people still alive that the earth no longer belongs to them. We are somewhere in the American Northwest. The year is unspecified, but what we know, what every survivor understands without being told, is that the vampires won. They came out of the darkness and they didn't stop. Governments collapsed. Cities burned. The military tried. The military failed. And what was left of humanity scattered into pockets of desperate, terrified people who learned one simple truth: stay hidden, stay quiet, or die screaming. This is not a story about before. This is a story about after. The scene opens on a woman lying on a medical table inside a fortified building, a former hospital in Seattle. She is completely still, not sleeping, not quite dead, something in between. Her name is Vanessa Van Helsing, and she has been lying there, in that strange suspended state, for 3 years. 3 years. Think about what that means. While the world outside was being torn apart, while people were losing everyone they loved, while whole cities were being claimed by the darkness, this woman simply waited, her body healing from wounds that should have killed her, her chest rising and falling so slowly that a person watching might blink and miss it. A soldier named Axel guards her. He has been guarding her since before the fall. He was assigned to her by the military, back when the military still meant something. When everyone else evacuated, when the orders came to abandon the post, Axel stayed, because that was his job, because something about this woman told him she mattered. And because, if he was being completely honest, he had nowhere else to go. The hospital sits on a hill. Around it, the vampires circle. They have learned not to enter the building as fortified. The perimeter holds, but they are patient in the way that only the dead can be patient. They are waiting for the day the lights go out. That day may be coming sooner than Axel thinks. His generator is failing. His food supply is dwindling. The soldier who was supposed to relieve him never came. For 3 years, Axel has survived on military rations and willpower and the quiet company of a woman who cannot speak to him. He talks to her sometimes. He doesn't know why. Maybe because he needs to hear his own voice. Maybe because some part of him believes she can hear him. He is not wrong. Inside that stillness, something is waking up. The attack comes without warning. A group of survivors, desperate, half-starved, dangerous in the way that frightened people always become dangerous, breaches the hospital perimeter. They are not organized. They are not military. They are simply people who found the hill and decided the building on top of it was better than whatever they were running from. Their names will matter later. What matters now is that they bring chaos inside walls that have been quiet for 3 years. In the commotion, the shouting, the scuffling, the crack of Axel's rifle, something extraordinary happens. Vanessa Van Helsing opens her eyes. Not slowly, not gradually. She opens her eyes like a woman waking from a nightmare she can still feel in her bones. Her hands grip the sides of the medical table. Her breath comes hard and fast. And then she sits up, swings her legs off the table, and stands on legs that haven't been used in 3 years without stumbling. The survivors who see this freeze. Axel sees this and feels something he hasn't felt in a long time. Hope. Terrifying, dangerous hope. Vanessa doesn't speak immediately. She takes in the room. She takes in Axel. She takes in the strangers who are staring at her like she is either a miracle or a threat. Her eyes are clear and sharp and older than they should be, as if while her body was suspended, her mind kept moving, kept processing, kept remembering, kept preparing for this exact moment. Is greater than, where is my daughter? That is the first thing she says. Not, where am I? Not, what happened? Not, how long was I out? She asks for her daughter, a little girl named Dylan. The silence that follows that question is answer enough. Axel doesn't know where Dylan is. The survivors don't know who Dylan is. And Vanessa Van Helsing, who has just woken up after 3 years and can apparently stand without effort on unused muscles, receives this information the way a soldier receives a mission. Not with tears, not with collapse, with resolve. But here's what none of these survivors know, yet what even Vanessa doesn't fully understand in this first waking hour is what she is, what she's become, what her blood can do. Because just moments after she wakes, One of the vampires that has been circling the perimeter breaches a weak point in the hospital wall. It moves fast, the way they always do, in human speed, no hesitation. It goes straight for the nearest warm body. Vanessa gets there first. She doesn't have a weapon. She doesn't need one. She grabs the vampire, this thing that has been killing trained soldiers for years, and she holds it. And then something happens that shouldn't be possible. The vampire looks at her, into her, and it recoils. Not from pain, not from a weapon, from her blood, from whatever is in her that has no name yet. It runs. The survivors watch this in silence. Axel watches this and says nothing, but his jaw tightens. Because he's seen something similar before, one time, early on, before Vanessa went under. He never told anyone because there was no one to tell, and because he wasn't certain of what he'd seen. Now he is certain. This woman is not just a survivor. She is something the vampires have never encountered. The question is whether that makes her salvation or a target. Hey, before this gets darker, drop a comment right now telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. Let's see how far this reaches. I'll be checking. The morning after Vanessa wakes is not a reunion. It is a negotiation. The survivors who breached the hospital are a fractured group held together by nothing but survival. There is Julius, a vampire whose origins will complicate everything. There is Mohammed, young and scrappy, and carrying grief he hasn't processed. There is Doc, the hospital's former physician, who made a terrible choice in those first days and has been living with it ever since. There is John, whose faith is the armor he wears over wounds he will never show anyone. And there are others, people who found each other by accident and stayed together because alone was a death sentence. They do not trust Vanessa. She woke up from a 3-year coma and immediately disarmed a vampire with her bare hands. That is not the resume of someone you trust immediately. And Vanessa does not trust them. She trusts Axel, barely, because he stayed. Everyone else is a variable. The first order of business is survival. The hospital is compromised. The breach that let the vampire in means the perimeter is weakened. They need to repair it or they need to move. Moving means going out into the open, into a world that belongs to vampires after dark. Repairing means staying in a building that is already on a shorter and shorter list of safe places. While the group argues, and they do argue, in the way that frightened people who don't know each other always argue, Vanessa is moving through the hospital with the focused intensity of someone cataloging resources. Medical supplies, food, weapons, exit routes. She moves like a soldier and like a mother simultaneously, and the combination is unsettling to watch. She finds a mirror. She stands in front of it for a long moment. The woman looking back at her has been unconscious for 3 years and somehow looks like someone who has been working every single day of them. Lean, alert, eyes that miss nothing. She looks at her hands, the hands that grabbed a vampire and made it run, and her expression is unreadable. Is greater than. What did they do to me? Axel, behind her, takes a breath. Is greater than nothing. That's what I can't explain. We didn't do anything. You just are what you are. This is the first real moment of the story, the kind that cuts deeper than action, because Vanessa Van Helsing woke up asking for her daughter, and now she is standing in front of a mirror asking what she has become. And the answer to both questions is the same answer. She doesn't know yet. She has to find out. She has to go out there, into the dead world, and find it. But the dead world comes to them first. A vampire named Dimitri, not common, not feral, sends a messenger. Dimitri is what passes for power in this new order. He is old, calculating, and he has heard that something woke up in the hospital on the hill. Something that smells different. Something that made one of his scouts run. Dimitri does not send his scouts running. This bothers him deeply. The messenger delivers a simple offer. Surrender Vanessa, and the survivors in the hospital live. The group receives this information differently. Some consider it, some are outraged. Axel is somewhere between outraged and tactical, his military training, telling him that an enemy willing to negotiate is an enemy who is afraid of something. Vanessa's response is not a speech, it is a decision. Is greater than nobody is surrendering me. Let's talk about what happens to them when we say no. And this is where the education lives in this story, because what Vanessa is demonstrating in this moment is something military strategists have understood for centuries. When a more powerful enemy attempts negotiation rather than overwhelming force, it reveals a weakness. Dmitri could send 100 vampires at that hospital. He's choosing not to. That choice is data. The group begins to fracture under the pressure because that is what pressure does to groups that don't trust each other. John believes they should hold the position and trust in something beyond strategy. Mohammed thinks movement is survival. Doc is quiet in the way that people are quiet when they know something they haven't said yet. And then Doc says it. She tells them what she did. In those first terrible days of the fall, when the vampires were taking the hospital and there was no way to stop them, Doc made a trade. She let them in. She opened a door she wasn't supposed to open, and people died because of it, and she has been carrying that fact inside this fortified building for 3 years like a stone in her chest. The group does not take this well. Axel takes it worst of all, not because Doc's guilt is unfamiliar, but because it means the trust inside these walls was already compromised before any of them knew it. In a world where the only currency is loyalty, this is catastrophic. Vanessa watches this unfold with those clear, calculating eyes. She watches the group splinter along the fault lines that were always there. And she makes a decision, not the decision to stay, not the decision to run, but the decision that defines who she is and what this story is actually about. She decides to go find her daughter, now, without waiting for consensus, without asking permission. Is greater than, I'm not asking you to come with me. I'm telling you I'm going. Dylan is out there. Mohammed, who has his own reasons for wanting to move, who has a sister he hasn't stopped looking for, either falls in beside her without a word. Axel, because he is Axel, follows. The three of them prepare to walk out of the only safe building in Seattle, into a daylight that is safer than night, but far from safe, into a world that has spent 3 years reorganizing itself around the assumption that humans are prey. What none of them know yet, what will only become clear when they are deep in the ruins of the city, is that Vanessa's awakening has already triggered something, not just in Dimitri's network, not just in the vampires who are now repositioning around the hospital, in the vampires who have been changed, in the ones who used to be human. One of them, moving through the ruins not far away, stops mid-stride and lifts its head. Something is pulling at it, something ancient and chemical and impossible to name. Its eyes, which have been dead and yellow for years, flicker for just a moment with something that looks almost like recognition. It turns and walks toward the hill. The city of Seattle is a ruin that has learned to breathe. Buildings still stand. Roads are still there. The infrastructure of a civilization exists, but emptied, hollowed, repurposed. Vampires don't tear things down. They inhabit. They claim. They move through the dark corridors of the old world, like they always belonged there, and humanity was the temporary arrangement. Vanessa moves through it, with Mohammed on one side and Axel on the other. She is not cautious in the way the other two are cautious. She does not flinch at sounds. She does not hug walls or hold her breath around corners. She moves through the vampire-claimed city like someone who has begun to understand, on a level she can't yet explain, that she is not their prey. But she is learning fast that she is something else to them entirely. The first real test comes in what used to be a shopping district. A nest for vampires, maybe 5, occupies the upper floor of what was once a department store. They sense the group below. They drop down in that liquid way that vampires move, legs bending wrong, heads tilting too far. They fix on Vanessa, not to attack, to study. Is greater than Mohammed, barely breathing. Why are they just standing there? Is greater than Axel, hand on his weapon. I don't know. Don't move. And then the closest vampire, a woman who was probably someone's neighbor, someone's teacher, not long ago takes a step back, and then another. And then they are gone, back into the shadows, and the street is empty again. Mohammed looks at Vanessa. Is greater than what are you? She doesn't answer, because she doesn't know. But she felt something when those vampires looked at her. Not fear, something older than fear. Something in her blood that spoke to whatever was in theirs, and whatever it said made them retreat. Here is what the science of this story is telling us, and yes, there is science underneath the mythology. The concept of a human being whose blood carries an antibody, a genetic marker, something that can counteract an infectious pathology, is not as far from reality as it sounds. In real virology, researchers look desperately for individuals who are naturally resistant to disease, people whose immune systems produce something the rest of us don't. These individuals become invaluable, not just for their survival, but for what their blood can teach us. Van Helsing is, at its core, a story about that idea pushed to its extreme. What if one person's blood wasn't just resistant? What if it could reverse the infection entirely? That is what Vanessa carries. That is why Dimitri wants her. Not to destroy her, to control her. The group finds shelter as the sun begins to drop an abandoned fire station with a heavy door and defensible windows, while Axel secures the perimeter and Mohammed eats something he doesn't look at too carefully. Vanessa is quiet in the corner. She is remembering. Not all of it. Not in order. But fragments are returning her life before, her daughter's face, the feeling of Dylan's hand in hers, a little girl who would be older now. A little girl who is somewhere in this dead world, and who may or may not still be the little girl Vanessa remembers. Is greater than? She's alive. It is not a question. I would know if she wasn't. Axel, to his credit, does not offer comfort. He offers honesty. Is greater than I don't know, Vanessa. I genuinely don't know. It is the right answer. It is the honest answer. And it is what allows Vanessa to trust him in a way she can't quite trust herself yet, because her own feelings about Dylan feel too big, too absolute to be reliable. They are woken in the night by something that shouldn't be possible. A knock at the door. Not the frantic banging of someone running, not the crash of attack. A knock, deliberate, patient. Axel goes to the window and looks out, and then he is very still. Standing outside the fire station, in the dark, is a vampire, alone, without aggression, and it is doing something that none of them have seen a vampire do since the fall. It is waiting to be let in. Vanessa is at the window before Axel can stop her. She looks at the vampire. The vampire looks at her. And then it speaks, because this vampire can still speak, can still form words, though they come out rough and unused, like a machine that has been off for years, struggling back to life. Is greater than, you smell like before. Before the fall, before the infection, before everything ended, nobody moves. Is greater than. There were others like me once, the vampire says. Before Dimitri, we were told there was no going back, but you smell like going back. This is the turn. This is the moment the story shifts from a survival story into something much bigger. Because what this vampire is saying, what it cannot fully articulate, but is trying desperately to communicate, is that the reversal isn't theoretical. It isn't a hope, it is a memory. There was a time, a brief window at the beginning of the fall, when some infected individuals began to show signs of regression. When the infection paused in certain hosts, those individuals were found, and they were eliminated not by humans, but by Dimitri, because a cure was a threat to everything he'd built. Vanessa understands this the way you understand something in a dream, not through reasoning, but through the body. She opens the door. Axel grabs her arm. É maior que Vanessa is greater than I know what I'm doing. She doesn't, not entirely, but she knows enough. She lets the vampire in, and she sits across from it, and she asks it to tell her everything it remembers about before. What it tells them over the next hour will change every calculation they've been making. The vampire's name, before, was Ted. He was a nurse. He was infected in the first wave. He has been what he is for 3 years. But something in the air, something that started, as best he can place it, around the same time the woman in the hospital was said to have woken up, has been slowing him, pulling him back towards something he can barely remember, pulling him toward human. Mohammed is doing math he doesn't want to do. If Vanessa's presence, even at a distance, was pulling a vampire back toward humanity, then her blood, concentrated, direct, is greater than. Could you actually cure them? He asks. Quiet, almost afraid of the question. Vanessa looks at her hands again, those hands that stopped a vampire cold. Is greater than, I don't know, she says, but I think that's what Dimitri is afraid of. The name Dimitri carries weight now. Not because of what he's done, though what he's done is monstrous, but because of what Vanessa's discovery means for him specifically. He didn't just survive the apocalypse, he engineered it. Not the original infection, perhaps, but its spread, its permanence, the structure of power that rose in the darkness afterward, the hierarchy of vampire society, the division of territories, the systematic elimination of any surviving human resistance, all of that has Dimitri's fingerprints on it. And at the very center of that structure is one foundational assumption, that there is no going back. If that assumption is wrong, if Vanessa Van Helsing's blood can pull vampires back across the line, then everything Dimitri has built collapses. He doesn't just want to contain her. He needs to eliminate the idea of her. The group now, including Ted, the former nurse, the vampire who is slowly, impossibly becoming something else, makes a dangerous decision. Instead of continuing their search for Dylan in isolation, they need allies. They need to find other survivor communities, because Vanessa's blood is not a personal resource, it is a weapon. And weapons, in wartime, need to be deployed strategically. This brings them to the farm, a farmstead outside the city, hidden behind enough dead farmland that the vampires have largely ignored it. A settlement of survivors, 20, maybe 25 people who have built something fragile and real in the ruins of the old world. They grow food, they have a water system, they have children. The leader of this community is a woman named Susan, not powerful, not military, but the specific kind of leader that emerges when what a group needs is someone to hold them together rather than fight. She has been doing that for 2 years. She has lost people. She has made impossible choices. And she looks at Vanessa Van Helsing with a combination of recognition and wariness that suggests she has heard the name before. Is greater than, there were stories, Susan says, about someone they were all afraid of, someone they were keeping in Seattle. We thought it was a myth. Is greater than, it wasn't. Is greater than, no. I can see that. The settlement gives them resources and something even more valuable. Information. Susan's people have been mapping vampire movement for months. They know which territories are actively patrolled and which are left alone. They know that Dimitri has been moving towards something consolidating power in a way that feels like preparation rather than maintenance. He is not settling in. He is mobilizing. Is greater than. He's going to make a push, Axel says, looking at Susan's maps. He's been building towards something, some kind of final sweep. Is greater than the last pockets of resistance, Susan confirms. Us. The settlements farther north. Anyone still holding out. The education hidden in this moment is about asymmetric warfare, the kind that has defined human conflict for centuries when a smaller force faces a larger, better resourced enemy. The answer, historically, has never been to match strength with strength. It has been to find the leverage point, the single thing that, if pulled, unravels the larger structure. For the Viet Cong against American forces, it was endurance. For the French resistance, it was information. For Vanessa Van Helsing against a vampire empire, it is her blood. But leverage only works if you live long enough to use it. And Dimitri, as if he can sense the shape of what they're planning, moves first. The attack on the farm comes at dusk, that terrible window when the light is just failing and the vampires are just activating, and the human defenders are caught between day confidence and night dread. They come in a wave. Not the full force of Dimitri's army that would come later, but enough. Enough to make a point, enough to take something. They take Mohammed. He is there, and then he is not. Pulled into the dark before anyone can reach him. And the vampires pull back, and the silence after is the loudest thing any of them have ever heard. Vanessa stands at the edge of the farm, looking out into the dark where Mohammed disappeared. Ted, the former nurse, the vampire who is becoming something between, his eyes now shifting between yellow and something that might almost be brown, stands beside her. Is greater than Dimitri has him, Ted says. He'll use him to get to you. Is greater than, I know. Is greater than. You're going to go after him. Yes. Is greater than. That's what he wants. Is greater than. I know that too. She goes anyway. Not because she doesn't understand the trap, but because understanding a trap and leaving someone inside it are two different things, and Vanessa Van Helsing is not built for the second option. Axel tries to argue strategy. She listens to every word. Is greater than. You're right, she says when he's done. And we're still going. Right now, if you've been watching this play out and you haven't subscribed yet, that's wild to me. You just sat with Vanessa through the hospital, through Seattle, through the farm. You felt it. And you're still anonymous. Subscribing costs you nothing. It just means you're not a visitor anymore. You're part of this. Hit it. I'll still be here. Dimitri's stronghold is a reclaimed stadium. Not subtle, not hidden. A declaration, a monument to the new order. A statement that the vampires are not hiding in shadows anymore. They have inherited the architecture of the world they conquered, and they are sitting in it comfortably. The stadium is lit by fires that don't flicker, surrounded by the kind of perimeter that only something that doesn't need to sleep can maintain. It is, by every conventional calculation, impenetrable. Vanessa has never been interested in conventional calculations. She comes with Axel and Ted and 4 survivors from Susan's farm who volunteered without being asked. She comes without a plan that anyone would recognize as a plan. She comes with her blood in her hands and a rage that has been 3 years in the making. But she also comes with something she didn't have before she walked into the ruin of Seattle. She comes with knowledge of what she is, of what she can do, of what Dimitri built, and why it is more fragile than it looks. The first thing they discover when they breach the outer perimeter is that Dimitri is not alone in his power structure. He has lieutenants, older vampires, smarter vampires, vampires who have maintained enough cognition to be genuinely dangerous, and those lieutenants have been told something about Vanessa Van Helsing. They have been told she is to be captured alive. This is the information that changes the math. If she is to be captured alive, then the order is not to kill her on sight, which means every vampire defending this stronghold has a directive that compromises their aggression. They cannot simply eliminate the threat. They have to manage it, contain it, and containment is a far harder instruction to follow when the thing you're trying to contain does not behave the way it should. Vanessa finds Mohammed. He is alive. Dimitri's word was good, which says something about how confident Dimitri is in his position. Mohammed is held in what was once a locker room beneath the stadium. He is not injured beyond what the initial capture did. He looks at Vanessa with the expression of someone who knows they were bait and is embarrassed about it. Is greater than I know, she says before he can speak. Don't. Is greater than, I was going to say thank you. Oh, a beat. Okay. But Dimitri knows she's there. Of course he does, this was the plan. And he comes to meet her, not with an army, but alone. Or apparently alone. Because Dimitri is old enough and confident enough to understand that in this meeting, the psychological weight is everything. He is tall. He is composed. He looks at Vanessa with genuine curiosity beneath the performance of control. Is greater than 3 years on a table, he says. And you wake up and walk into my house. I respect that. Is greater than, where's my daughter? He tilts his head. And then he does something unexpected, something that recalibrates the entire encounter. He tells her the truth. He doesn't know where Dylan is. He never took Dylan. He never needed to. Dylan was never the leverage. Vanessa herself was always the variable he needed to control, and controlling Dylan was never part of that calculation because Dylan's location was, frankly, irrelevant to what he needed from her blood. Vanessa processes this. The daughter she woke up asking for, the daughter she has been driving toward through every choice in this story. Dimitri does not have her, which means Dylan is somewhere else, which means Dylan may actually be alive. The relief and the terror of this hit simultaneously, and Dimitri watches it happen with those calculating eyes, and he decides this is the moment. Is greater than, you could stop all of this, he says. Quiet, reasonable, the voice of someone who has had this argument before and won it. Give me what I need. Give me a way to understand what's in your blood, not to cure it, not to spread it, just to understand it, and I stop the push. The settlements survive. The people in your little hospital on the hill survive. Your soldier survives. He does not mention Dylan. He is too smart to mention Dylan, because he can see that Dylan is the one thing she will not negotiate. Is greater than, and what do you get? Axel asks, from behind Vanessa. Is greater than, insurance. Dimitri says simply, if there is something in her blood that can undo what I've built, I need to know about it before anyone else does. I need to know how to neutralize it. Is greater than, so you can make sure there's no cure, Vanessa says. Is greater than, so I can make sure there's no chaos, he replies. A cure released into the world without control. Do you have any idea what that would do? Millions of infected, reverting simultaneously. The violence of that reversion, the psychological cost, the is greater than. You're afraid, Vanessa says. He stops. Is greater than. You built all of this, she continues, on one idea, that they can't come back. And now you're standing in front of me knowing that they can, and everything you've built, every calculation you've made for 3 years, is balanced on stopping me before anyone finds out. Dimitri's composure does not crack, but something behind his eyes shifts. And that is when Ted steps forward. The former nurse, the vampire who has been slowly, impossibly walking back toward the line he crossed 3 years ago. He steps into the firelight where Dimitri can see him clearly, and Dimitri, for the first time in this encounter, goes very still. Because Ted is the proof. Ted is standing there with eyes that are no longer fully yellow. Ted is the argument made flesh. Is greater than. There were others like him, Vanessa says. At the beginning, you had them removed. Is greater than. That was necessary. Is greater than. It was fear. You were afraid then, and you're afraid now. The fight that follows is not cinematic in the traditional sense. It is brutal and close and fast. Dimitri is powerful. Centuries of existence have made him something beyond what his lieutenants are, and Vanessa is not without vulnerabilities. She takes damage. Real damage. The kind that would have killed a normal person twice over. But she doesn't stop, and in the moments when Dimitri gets close, when his hands are on her and his intention is clear, she grabs him back, and something in her blood speaks to whatever is left in him of what he was before he was this. Whatever Dimitri was, 300 years ago, whatever human thing is buried under the centuries and the power and the architecture of an empire. It doesn't reverse him. She is not a miracle cure in a single touch. But it staggers him, and staggered is enough. Axel is there, Ted is there, the survivors from the farm are there. Dimitri retreats, not defeated, not destroyed, but pulled back. The vampires in the stronghold, without his presence anchoring the directive, break their containment order. Some attack. Some flee. In the chaos of a hierarchy disrupted, everything becomes variable. Muhammad gets them out. Through a service tunnel he found while he was being held. Through a back entrance that Dimitri never thought to fortify because no one had ever gotten inside in the first place. They emerge into the night and they run. And the night lets them. Because word has spread vampire to vampire, through whatever network connects the infected, that the woman from the hospital is real, that the man with the changing eyes is real, that the idea Dimitri built his empire on might not be as solid as he said, that there might be a way back. In the aftermath, the days following, when the group returns to Susan's farm and then, eventually, back to the hospital on the hill, Vanessa does something that will matter more than anything else she did in the stadium. She lets Ted complete the process. She gives him her blood, directly, in a clinical setting, because Doc is still there, still carrying her guilt, but also still a physician who understands what she's watching. And over the course of hours, in a room where all of them hold their breath, Ted stops being a vampire. He is sick, severely sick. The body does not reverse 3 years of infection painlessly, but he comes through. He is human again. Doc, who has been quiet since her confession, stands in that room and watches something impossible become real. And then she starts writing everything she observed, every measurement she can take, every stage of the process. Because this is not Ted's story. This is the beginning of a formula. Is greater than Axel. Does this mean you can cure all of them? Is greater than Vanessa. I don't know yet, but it means I can cure one, and one is not nothing. She is right. One is not nothing. In the history of medicine, of resistance, of every war ever fought, the first proof that something is possible is worth more than any strategy. The first demonstration that the infection can be reversed, that what Dimitri said was permanent, is not permanent, that is, the crack in the foundation of everything he built. She still doesn't know where Dylan is. That search is not over. That search is, in many ways, just beginning. But she knows something now that she didn't know when she woke up 3 years of silence and opened her eyes in a hospital while the snow fell. She knows what she is. She is not just a survivor. She is the proof. She is the walking, breathing, fighting evidence that the world that ended is not the world that has to stay ended. That the darkness that came and claimed everything did not win, not completely, not permanently, because one woman's blood remembers what being human means, and that memory is contagious in ways that Dimitri never planned for. Vanessa Van Helsing stands at the window of the hospital on the hill and looks out at the snow. It is still falling. The world is still broken. There are still vampires in the dark. But somewhere out there, a little girl is still alive. And somewhere out there, the idea of a cure is spreading faster than Dimitri can contain it. And Vanessa Van Helsing has not yet begun to fight. What did you think? Did you expect her blood to be the weapon all along? Drop it in the comments. And if this hit the way it was supposed to, you already know what to do. We'll be here for the next one.